Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sam Beast Consulting YouTube channel, and today we're going to talk about something that's a bit difficult and a bit awkward, and that's price rises in 2026, but not for software. Today we are going to be talking about the price rises for hardware that you can expect to see in this coming year and this financial year as well. But hey, before we start, please don't forget to check down there that you have liked the video, that you subscribe, so that you don't miss anything coming up this year. We've got so much great content coming. We really obviously don't want you to miss it. So please make sure that you have checked that you've liked and subscribed down there. Let's start with the obvious then. Everything is increasing in price. Not only the software licenses, software subscriptions, SaaS, cloud services, but also hardware as well. And hardware price rises doesn't seem to get as much attention or publicity as it should, because ultimately software price rises, cloud price rises seem to be more prevalent and more important to budget holders and stakeholders and ITAM people. But I'm going to stop you right there and say that hardware price rises should also be important and something that you need to consider when building out your hardware refresh planning and when building out your hardware budgets. So in this video, we are going to cover the typical price rise percentages that we're being told and that we're seeing, why hardware is getting more expensive, which hardware vendors are impacted and that we're seeing price rises for, and finally, what you as ITAM professionals can do to mitigate these price rises. So first things first then, and I have written this down so that I don't forget about it all. We are seeing price rises kind of vary between the different IT asset types. So for example, end user devices, so that's desktops, laptops, mobile phones, the stuff that you give out to your end users basically, we're seeing between a 5 and 12% price increase. Enterprise servers, storage, we're then seeing an 8 to 20% price rise depending on the make, model and specification of the server, for example, that you're looking at. Network equipment, we're seeing between 7 and 15% price rises, again depending on the make, model and spec of the particular hardware. And finally, the more premium and, dare I use the words, AI ready software, that's seeing the biggest price rise, and quite frankly we'll dive into it a bit more later in this video, but AI is one of the primary reasons for the price rises and the demand in components and materials to be able to power AI ready computers and data centers and servers. But yeah, anything to do with AI ready hardware, that's seeing a 15 to 25% price increase. This doesn't always show up in a clean way. Very much like software licenses, price increases don't show up cleanly because of course you've got to take into account existing discounts that are being removed. You've got to take into account entry level, products that are being removed, or even base hardware that's being removed, where you could have like an 8 gig of RAM, whereas now they've removed that. You can only have a 16 gig of RAM. You can only have this chipset. You can only have this screen size. You can only have this graphics card, for example. How they're moving around the bundles to quietly increase the prices in that way, including extra support and extended warranties are being restructured and becoming more expensive. And of course, then that means then that the Premier, Premium, Gold, Silver, Bronze, whatever supporting structure they have or whatever the naming convention they call it, that is also then seeing knock-on effects of being more expensive. So it's not just on the overall list price that you need to look at, it's the whole ecosystem of the device, the different specs that you're now being pushed into using because they've removed some base models, the increase in the standard warranties or supports that you're having to factor in, and then the increase in price for any additional extended or Premier or Platinum or Gold support that again is impacting the overall life cycle cost of this equipment. So why is this happening? And the first thing I think we should mention is that we have seen hardware price rises increase before. Primarily back in 2020, 2021, 2022, etc. And the knock-on effect of some natural disasters in China, some issues going on with warehouses over there, and of course then the global pandemic. That reduced the manufacturing churn, that basically they couldn't cope with the demand of needing laptops as everyone started home working. There were some local disasters that then also impacted the creation of chipsets and memory and stuff like that, because the warehouses were flooded and they couldn't actually get the components out. And then of course supply and demand, there was less supply, more demand, prices went up, and then customers had that knock-on effect, because obviously hardware vendors are going to push all of those price rises onto you, the end customer. And yet when talking to hardware vendors and resellers, it's kind of almost a very similar story to 6-7 years ago, where we've got certain pricing hasn't stabilized. I mean, they've called out semiconductors here, RAM, GPUs, and specialized AI chip manufacturing. The pricing is volatile, and also in terms of actually having the raw materials for them to create these is also proving tricky. And also you've got to factor in some of the political things that are going on at the moment within the world. I'm looking at tariffs, I'm looking at certain countries not trading with other countries, or if they are trading, that they're going to increase the price massively in import-export fees. As the cost of materials have gone up, so the cost of support is obviously going to go up, because replacing anything that's in there is going to be more expensive. And you get the drill, the knock-on effect comes to the customer. We also mentioned AI earlier, and that is another key driving point that is pushing up the cost of hardware. Not only end-user based hardware, but all of your infrastructure, network gear, and AI-specific hardware as well. That's because of the demand, the sheer growth and demand of AI over the past 5 years, even shorter than that, even in the past 2 or 3 years, has been significant. You just have to look now at Windows devices, at MacBooks, and all of the AI capabilities that they have, and all of the extra hardware and computing power that they need to be able to do that. You also then have to look at the AI companies themselves, or Microsoft, I wouldn't call them an AI company, but are introducing all of this AI capabilities. It doesn't just come out of thin air. They have to increase their infrastructure. They have to develop their infrastructure as well in order to develop their own AI capabilities. They're going to need more servers. They're going to need more capabilities on those servers to support the likes of Copilot that they're rolling out, and general, open AI to support ChatGPT. That all requires hardware, and a lot of it, which is then obviously increasing the demand for certain bits of hardware and certain components, which is then driving up the price. Again, supply and demand. There's an awful lot of demand for it at the moment, and the supply is trying to keep up with that. And it's the same in your personal life, right? I remember when iPhones first came out, the supply wasn't there to meet the demand. So whenever people were getting hold of them, they were reselling them at a higher value, and getting them was like gold dust. Same in more recent times with the PlayStation 5. There was a huge demand for that. However, because of, ironically, hardware, component and supply issues, there was a delay in getting that out and meeting that demand. So if you had a PlayStation 5, you could resell it for, 3-4 times in some cases what the RRP was, especially around Christmas and seasonal times. So it's the same. It's the same concept on that. But we're just seeing such a huge rise in demand for the physical hardware to support the AI infrastructure. And that's really not going to change anytime soon, as organizations really push and develop their AI capabilities. I mean, Copilot's being updated all the time. ChatGPT as well is constantly being updated. And when they're introducing things like Sora with the video, that doesn't just come from thin air. They need the computing power behind that to develop that and provide it to customers. Therefore, they need hardware. They're also, obviously, from the hardware standpoint, they need faster CPUs as well to be able to process this stuff quicker, and dedicated GPUs and NPUs. Again, the way that they're developing and being able to build out this AI infrastructure and the AI services, they need RAM as well, right? When I was doing this research to understand what exactly do AI systems need to be able to support the likes of Copilot and ChatGPT, and yeah, RAM, again, something so simple, something that we use in everything, all forms of hardware, we have RAM in there. Again, the old joke, what's the difference between memory and RAM? Memory is RAM. Yeah, sorry, lame. But yeah, it needs RAM. We need RAM in laptops. We're being given more RAM in laptops as well. When they're removing less RAM from your 8 gig of RAM, it's now the entry level is 16 gig. And the hardware vendors are always having to provide and find the 16 gig RAM, to put in all of that. It's a vicious cycle of supply and demand, components getting more expensive, therefore the actual physical device getting more expensive. So let's all blame AI, as wonderful as it is. And if the AI overlords watch this in a couple of years' time and want to come after me, fine. But you are kind of responsible for a lot of these price rises in the hardware space and giving ITAM managers a bit of a headache. Another thing is all about sustainability as well, driving up the cost of components because people want to be more environmentally friendly. They want to be more sustainable. So they're looking for better ways in which to provide hardware or use hardware in a more sustainable way. And another push as to why, because things get more expensive, they start looking at repairability rules. Is it economical repair? Is it environmentally friendly to repair? Is it sustainable? And although ethical sourcing for the physical materials and components that come into it. And then again, you've got the whole political element of it, and whether it is actually ethical sourcing, if this country is sourcing it from that country, and that whole minefield, which we're not going to go into because we're not political, but that is actually impacting some of the price rises. And of course, we've seen it a lot with clients, is longer device life cycles as well. They're lasting longer. Before, you could get 3 years out of a Windows device before it started getting slower. That's now moving up to 4 or 5 years. We've said this so many times. MacBooks, for example, they're stretching to 5, 6, 7 years, and they're still going. They're still reliable. They're still performing. That then means that hardware vendors are actually losing out on money because you're not buying hardware in the same refresh rate that you previously have been. Instead of buying it in 3-year cycles, you're building it out in 4-year cycles. So every time they're almost missing a year, until eventually they will miss a full life cycles worth of orders because you keep increasing the timeline for it. How are they going to get that money back? Increasing the prices. They're not going to miss out because they've made their hardware more reliable. They're just going to increase the overall cost to factor in that actually we're seeing that our customers are using this over a 4-year period, a 5-year period, rather than previously the 2 or 3 years. It's the same for your end user based assets. It's the same for your network gear, your infrastructure gear. Everything is lasting longer, which is fantastic from a sustainability standpoint, from a performance standpoint, and from a budgeting standpoint, especially if you're trying to eke out that extra bit of hardware budget. You can run it for an extra year, but it's not good news for the hardware vendors and the resellers who are now missing out on revenue in certain years, or even as you keep increasing the life cycle, move it to 4 years, you are gaining that year. You as an ITAM person are gaining that year each time. However, the hardware vendors are losing that year, and ultimately you do that so many times and they've lost a whole refresh cycle. So which hardware vendors are we seeing doing price rises? And the short and simple answer is all of them. Unfortunately, we are seeing the price rises. And again, they do this in a really nice way where it's a new model, a new generation of model, or a completely new release with a change in spec, better processing power, better graphics and all of that kind of stuff, better cooling. So yeah, we typically see these price rises at the release of a new model or a new generation. Even my beloved OnePlus that I use, they're also increasing their prices. Pretty much everyone is. So that means that there's fewer lower cost entry level models that we're seeing, premium pricing for those AI device readies, shorter price lock periods as well in contracts. Even if you're developing that hardware RFP and you're building out the long-term 3-year contract, previously you could price lock that for a specific period of time, like for 3 years, this is what we're paying for the hardware. It's not happening anymore. They're only looking at it every 3 to 6 months because they know of the environmental and the mitigating factors that are increasing their production costs, and they're going to obviously want to put that back onto you. And if you do have a contract with them for a 3 or 5 year period, it's likely that you are having those difficult conversations now where they're saying, remember we price locked? Unfortunately, we're going to have to increase it by X% this year. And I guarantee a lot of you are having those conversations because I've had those conversations with clients as well. Bit of confusion on the client side going, yeah, but we've price locked for 3-4 years. Hardware vendors going, there's a clause that says that we can review this every 6 months, and we're reviewing it now and increasing it by X amount percentage. So what can we as ITAM professionals do to mitigate these price rises? The first things first is always have a shop around. I always recommend to clients that if you're unhappy with the price rises and you're not in a long-term dedicated contract with a hardware provider, have a look at what different manufacturers are providing. Have a look at different specs as well. So you're looking at make, models and specs. specs. There may be the opportunity for you to move to a very similar model with another hardware provider that can do everything you need to do but is $200 cheaper, or even existing models that you're buying that you can decrease certain specifications because it's considered overkill now. Maybe you're a cloud-first organization. In previous, you had like 1 terabyte of SSD. You can bring that down to try and save money because you've now moved to that cloud-first mentality. So you can save some actual local storage on there. Maybe you are buying too much RAM and there is still a base model that is less RAM that you could downgrade to. But yeah, have a shop around. Look what's out there. Do not be afraid to switch models if you are locked into a contract, or don't even be afraid to switch models and manufacturers if you're not locked into a contract. Also, have a look at all of the support that you've got, whether you're actually benefiting from any additional support that you're purchasing. If it's standard warranty, fine, it comes with it anyway. But if you are paying for any of that, like Gold, Premium, Premier, Platinum, Apple Care, whatever it is, really do dig into the data and understand if you really are getting value out of that. And if you're not getting value out of it, stop buying it, in essence. Just stop it. Use that sounded like I was telling you off. Use the standard warranty that comes with it if you're not seeing the value. Or if you only want to cover a certain asset type, like you want to cover all of your laptops, but you don't want to cover your desktops or your monitors, do that. Do that. Don't be afraid to mix and match to see how you can reduce those costs down. Of course, another way that you can mitigate these is by properly extending the life cycle. I'm not talking just on a whim and going, right, boom, we now have 4-year life cycles, but really looking into whether you can do that, whether your existing models and your existing spec has the capabilities of doing so. And if you can really communicate, get a plan in place to be able to extend the life cycle of your devices by 1 or 2 years, whatever you think is achievable, adjust your budget rates based on that and adjust your hardware refresh planning based on that. Because again, in the short term, that could really save you money on your hardware budgeting and your hardware refreshing. And it could also spread it out over the next number of years. Instead of having that big bang next year where you've got your 3-year life cycle, if you go, well, this model we're going to eke out to 4 years, this model we will focus on 3 years because it is getting a bit slow and it is causing some problems. However, this model seems to be good. We're going to extend that to 4 years. Our MacBook estate is actually doing really well. We can extend that out to 5 years. And you can start building out your hardware refresh planning and your budget in a much longer kind of term. It may be less invasive and less costly from a budgeting standpoint. Finally, my last bit of advice to try and mitigate these price rises is have a look at DaaS again, device as a service. See if that is actually going to be more cost effective for you in being able to provide new equipment to your end users, not owning it so it comes out of your OPEX rather than CAPEX. We've done whole videos on the differences between what you need to consider for device leasing, what you need to consider for device as a service, etc. So feel free to go back and have a look at those. But now might be a great time to really reevaluate that if you're finding that buying the hardware is getting too costly, if you can't extend the life cycle. Quite frankly, I think that this is a really exciting challenge for ITAM. I love it when we get these kind of price rises. It allows you to be a bit creative, see what you can do to mitigate these price increases and the impact that it has on your budget. Work with your key stakeholders, work with vendor management, make everyone aware of these price rises and what you're going to do your best to mitigate it. Make ITAM look a hero like it always does, because ITAM is a fantastic function to have within any organization, and this is a primary open goal for us to hit. Don't know why you'd hit the ball into an open goal, kick the ball into an open goal and provide real value and real benefit and real financial benefit as well to an organization by trying to mitigate these price rises. So unfortunately, you can then go and focus on those software price rises, which are also coming in 2026, and we'll do another video on that in a couple of weeks. Really do hope that you found this useful. Price rises are here, they're happening. We need to manage it. ITAM is the best place to start managing it and being proactive in that management. Before you go, please do not forget to have a look down there. Make sure you are subscribed, like this video. And until next time, as always, happy ITAMing and happy mitigating all of these crazy price rises that are going on in 2026.